this is where India is different from the rest of the world, our rural areas will still remain rural. You and I cannot sit here and think like Europe, all of rural India will move to urban India. Agriculture does not use water inefficiently. Agriculture is something that uses it as efficiently because the farmers very rarely get water. So I think we have to get out of the myths, but we have to also understand that this tension is going to grow between urban and rural India. You would have read recently about the Hirakud Dam, that farmers get out the Hirakud Dam saying they will not allow the water to be taken to the industry. In Tonk recently, 2 years ago, there was a police firing when the farmers said, we won't allow our water to be taken to a city. In Maharashtra, you have so many cases. I think this tension between rural and urban India can only change if urban India today and industrial India today becomes more water prudent. Urban India must say it does not need a single more drop of water. It will use its own water, recycle and reuse it. Every drop of sewage of urban India must be recycled and reused. Instead, urban India, because it's powerful and all politicians worry about urban India now in spite of it being such a rural country, every politician will say to their people, I will bring you water.
From where?
From where? Who cares?
And that's an equity issue, basically, where the water falls, the people are still thirsty.
Exactly.
Whereas you are trying to satisfy not just thirst, but probably the greed of other populations.
Absolutely.
So that's the point.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned about water conservation movement, which is now growing on the ground. I remember, if I could be right, that you published one booklet on the traditional system of conserving water.
That's right.
I mean, this is a very interesting documentation and compilation of practices that are there in the whole of India. Do you think those practices somewhere are more relevant today than what they were some time ago? Because that time the population size was so small, but despite that they're doing it. But now population has increased, demand has magnified, and therefore we really need these policies to be put in place now more than before.
Absolutely. And Sureshji, if you look at it, what was the traditional practices? It was not about less water. The traditional practices were built on two principles. One, decentralized water, essentially arguing that if the need is decentralized, then the supply should also be decentralized. Okay. Two, it was about using the available water as much as possible in an optimized manner. Now, in today's India, those two principles are even more relevant than they were in the past. Because today, as I keep saying, if you do not manage your local water more efficiently, you will not be able to pull water from somewhere else. You have to first manage your water. Yeah. And so that principle of catching water where it falls is more relevant today. Look at Mumbai. Yeah. I mean, Mumbai is a classic case. It's always, today it wants water from further and further away. It's bringing its water from long distances. Yeah. The wastage of that water when it brings it to the city is enormous. And yet Mumbai is destroying all its wetlands because it wants the land. But tomorrow it must also realize it wants water as much as it wants land. And land is also for water. So I think these are issues that every city must learn today, because otherwise the water crisis is only going to get worse.
And now when talking about water again, that brings us to a very important issue of forest, because many sources of water actually originate from forest. And therefore, if there are no forest, probably there won't be water, and therefore there won't be any human life and maybe biological life over a period of time. I remember you were chairing a group on tigers. Tiger again is a symbol of our ecosystem, whether it's intact or not. Tell me what happened to that report. Did it finally got implemented, or what are the issues? Because after the report, there were two lobbies which were fighting one another. Yeah. There's the conservation lobby who is saying tigers more important. Then the forest dwellers lobby saying foresters are more important, or the forest dwellers are more important. So do you think there is still a meeting ground for both the lobbies to meet and actually solve this problem together?
Well, I think there has to be a meeting ground. If you want your forests and if you want your tigers, you will have to protect your people and build on. It's a classic map of India. When I presented the report to the Prime Minister, I showed that map. I said, if you were to take the forests of India and on top of that layer the poor people of India, they live together. So the poorest people of India live where the forests of India are. Now if you add to this where the tigers are, The tigers also live in the same place. So the forest, the water of India, the watersheds of India, the tigers of India, all live together with the poorest people of India. Now, you have to understand that conservation will...
The poorest people of India and tigers live together, you mean tigers also become poorer over a period of time?
Well, I think tigers get a lot of money from the government, but I think if they live in a circumstance of hostility, tigers cannot survive. And I think that is what we have done. We have created a war inside. People today hate the tiger because they believe that they get no benefits from tiger conservation. And so poor people of India, particularly the tribals of India, do not destroy like urban India would do. But today there is hostility. And in hostility, in a war circumstance, everybody loses. And I think that's the message that we had put forward in our report. This is the Tiger Task Force report that we submitted to government. We did put down an agenda for reform, and I'm happy to report that the government is acting on every one of those points. It will take time because the vested interest in the conservation lobby is very strong. They do strongly believe that people should be, somewhere they should just go away. Now the fact is that in the last many years, 50 years of India's conservation history, we have relocated only 80 villages which live in the forest, in the tiger reserves. And we have altogether some 2,000 villages to relocate. So the message that I gave in the report was that yes, we should relocate. Yes, I believe that conservation in certain areas we will have to do in a way that only tigers can live. So we should do relocation, but for that relocation to work, you must give people a better package. You must do it in a much better manner. And 3, there will be areas, because you will never be able to relocate everybody. You cannot do it like the North Americans did, who just killed off all the Indian population in North America so that they have wilderness areas today. You will have to also find a way in which you will coexist. And coexistence means sharing the benefits of tourism with local communities, giving them jobs in the national parks and the sanctuaries.
Your recommendations in the report?
Absolutely. And some of it is getting implemented faster, some of them a little slowly. But I think this is the only way ahead. India will have to find a middle path. We need conservation, we need development of the poor. And the fortunate thing is that they can go together.
So your organization, as the name suggests, you focus on environmental issues. I think the biggest environmental challenge of today's times is climate change. And I think in a way, all these environmental issues will finally get converged into climate change issues. If you address climate change, many of these issues that we are seeing, they are actually the symptoms of the problem. Will get addressed anyway. So where do you think how we are actually now moving as a world to solve this climate change problem? Because we had a Bali action plan, which was really speaking inaction plan, which many people say. And now we are actually pinning our hopes on Copenhagen 2009 to come out with a successor to Kyoto Protocol. How optimistic you are, and how you think, because you are also globally well connected, your organization has a lot of counterparts in many parts of the world. What do you think, the global community, is it moving in tandem with what your expectations are?
Frankly, no. I do not believe that the climate change challenge as it is today, and it is a life-threatening challenge, I do not believe that the world as a whole is giving us the response at the scale that is needed, the urgency with which it is needed. You know that in fact the emissions of the rich world have actually increased. Between 1990 to 2005, the rich country emissions have gone up and not down. Australia has increased its emission by 37%, a country like the United States by 20%. So even Europe, which has been at the vanguard, is finding it's losing its battle as far as emission reduction is concerned, because the soft options in Europe have gone, and now very difficult options are in front of that society. So I think what is happening in the world is that they are unable now to make the transition that is needed, and so there is a lot of blaming on India and China, passing the buck to us, and I think in that you will see a stalemate. And the unfortunate part is that we don't have the power to be able to demand from the rich world that they have to reduce their emissions. They have to be serious about it. We are most vulnerable. We will be hit but we don't have the power to be able to call their bluff and also ensure that they actually reduce their emissions. So I think climate change debate is going to be a very tough one, and I think this is where civil society has to play the most critical role, because it is civil society which should now play the role of forcing governments to be more serious.
No, so the Kyoto Protocol, in fact, was mandating all these rich countries, industrialized nations, called Annex 1 countries to reduce emissions. They have not done that. But now seems to be, they have been very successful in confusing the rest of the world by saying that is no longer their reduction is an issue, but reduction of emissions in countries like India is an issue.
Absolutely.
I will not talk about China because China's emissions also gone up considerably. But India is really insignificant in that sense, considering the size of population, considering the fact that we are so many poor in India. So you think what should be the response of government of India, for that matter, country as India as a whole, in climate change negotiations, which are going to enter a very crucial stage now in the next 1.5 years' time? So what do you think should be our response? Should we really say that, yes, we are also willing to take any commitments, or we should say no, we cannot?
Well, I think very clearly India must not take on commitments. So that I would put aside. But I think India must have a dual negotiating strategy. Some amount it is doing, but I think what we need to do is to really support the government to make sure that it can really argue this very strongly. One, I think, and the most difficult one, is that India will have to get very tough with the United States. United States, Japan, Canada, Australia are
despite
today...
our newfound friendship with United States.
In fact,
politically.
In fact, I would argue that if we are such good friends, then we should be able to persuade them to be serious about this.
Friends should understand our other friends' problems.
Exactly. And if they don't, then we better learn not to be friends with them. Because this issue of climate change is too serious for us to play around. And the United States is the single biggest barrier to change today. And it is very clear that the Indian government, in the past, has played with the Americans, not against the Americans, because it has gone in with the Asia-Pacific Partnership, as you know. And the Asia-Pacific Partnership is America's way of bringing on board countries like India and China and arguing that all of us should take voluntary action. All of us should take action in 2050. I think India has to make it very clear, no, we need serious action, tough targets, and we need you to meet the targets by 2020. The second part of India's argument has to be...
2050, nobody will be there.
Ridiculous, yeah. I mean, it's a mindless thing to ask
when
for it.
When the ship is sinking, we are saying that we will deal with the sinking ship only when we go to the shore. We'll never find the shore.
Absolutely. So I think very rightly, as you're saying, it has to be 2020. Tough, first, to reduce emissions from them. And two, India must argue that yes, we can do things differently. We are prepared to make the transition, the leapfrog. We believe in being more efficient. We believe in making the difference as far as a low carbon economy is concerned. But for that, we need changes in the way the current mechanisms like the clean development mechanism are structured. So you need to get the money to be able to make the transition today, and you need to put pressure on the North to be able to cut their emissions yesterday.
So now tell me, all the issues you talked about, it seems that all these issues are personified into one single personality like Sunita Narain. Tell me, Sunita, how do you derive this strength to fight on so many issues, such a diverse range of issues, nationally, globally, with top, very powerful industrial houses? Where do you get strength from?
It's difficult to say, Sureshji, but I think all of us get our strength from only one source, which is that there is a problem and that we very strongly believe that we have the possibility to be able to change and to make sure that that problem can go away, and that we have to do so. How long have you been doing this? Almost now 25 years.
So when you started on this journey of fighting for this right and fighting for the cause, what do you think 25 years looking back, has situation improved? You think any hope for better in the years to come, or is it a lost story?
No, I have a lot of hope. I see back on 25 years, I find that as a society we are much more aware of the challenges. We understand the nature of the challenge, which we perhaps didn't 25 years ago. I think we also remain a very humane society. We remain a society which wants inclusive growth, which wants justice. And I think with those two, I believe we can do things differently. I think it is all of us who have to fight, argue, kick and push, cajole, do whatever is necessary so that we can get that difference in public policy.
So you think that tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday and today?
It can be better.
Okay.
And if it isn't better, it's because all of us have failed.
So thank you very much, Sunita, on this optimistic note, hoping that tomorrow is going to be better. So I wait for that tomorrow to come sooner. And as you said, that cannot happen without participation of everybody. So thank you very much for joining on this program. This was Sunita Narain talking to us about various issues, but also saying that it cannot not possible to change tomorrow unless we act today. And that action has to be in conjunction with you and us together. So let us hope that tomorrow will be better. Let us work on that. Thank you very much for joining in this program of Top Shot. We'll join you next week again with another personality talking to issues which concern you and me. So.